The Biden administration is invading our local schools in an attempt to inject itself into community debates on explicit books and promotion of transgenderism to kids. It begs the question, didn't leftists learn anything when they tried to label the Loudoun County parents as domestic terrorists? Welcome to Speak Up Virginia, equipping you to speak up on the life, family, and freedom issues that matter most to you. From the Family Foundation, I'm your host, Candy Cushman, with our president, Victoria Cobb. All right, well, Victoria, today you have this fun kind of raspy broadcaster voice thing going on, but I kind of think it's cool.
Everybody's going to now pay attention to how I talk, but yes, I am fighting some allergies and some cold and whatever, so it is what it is.
I think it sounds... yeah, like the cool broadcaster voice. And
thank you.
It's nice to know with the cold that I'm in this box with you. Like we're not 6 feet apart, people.
Yeah. So. I've been struggling it for months, so honestly, I think it's allergies,
all right.
Unfortunately.
Well, before we get started today, I did want to reprise a little debate we've been having in the office, and that is the Richmond Riverwalk. Is that even called Riverwalk?
That's a good question. I don't know the answer to what I think they call it the Canal Walk. The Canal.
Yeah, it's the Canal Walk.
The Canal Walk. Catherine's got us squared away.
Versus the famous San Antonio Riverwalk that Catherine Wiley in our office dared to compare.
she's gonna clarify exactly. Go ahead, Catherine. How'd you say it?
I said they were much like each other.
Yeah,
That's
so
it.
some of us, so we talked about this on the podcast before. Remember, we shared with you guys that we had different thoughts about that. Well, I also announced that we were going to do it as our staff and board retreat thing. We were going to all go to because honestly, it's amazing. I've been in Richmond 27 years and had never done it. Didn't even know actually where on the canal it even started.
Yeah.
I mean, I was pretty ignorant about it.
Yeah, I had no idea that was there. I actually really enjoyed it.
I enjoyed it. We have interesting history, which you always forget, and they did a really good job. I learned about the Triple Crossing, which also I've been here 27 years and didn't know, but apparently it's a big deal that we have 3 private train tracks that cross over top of each other. Yeah, I just thought it was a brewery. There's a brewery in Richmond called Triple Crossing. I've heard of it, but I didn't know there was a thing that it was named after.
It's supposed to be a big deal if you actually spot 3 trains.
Yeah, I guess it doesn't happen that often that all 3 actually go. But but it was interesting. It does not have, it's not commercialized like San Antonio's Riverwalk. I mean, that's the
nice
big
way to
difference.
pre-up the debate. I'll mention a couple things I did enjoy. That Leonardo da Vinci bridge.
Yes, it's very cool. I felt like I could see it in a painting of his or something.
Yeah. I enjoyed the history of the fire in 1865 where a lot of buildings were burned.
1,000 buildings or something like that, which I didn't know it was that big. I probably should. I mean, we should know our history a little bit.
Yeah, but
and I thought, well, we're in one that didn't burn, our historic building that we're in here. Yeah,
so
that was cool.
That made me kind of want to walk around Richmond more and learn about that. But even despite all that, we are talking about maybe 2 miles.
Yeah, it's very short. Although San Antonio's isn't
San Antonio's is short.
It is 15 miles.
But you don't actually go 15.
You do a 30-minute
loop.
Yes,
I felt like it's equally short as far as the time they put you on a boat or whatever, or what you walk alongside of.
Richmond Canal is not lined with fabulous Mexican restaurants
and little hotels.
Closed.
Yes, we don't have any of that.
That's true. But the San Antonio historical tour is, hey, here's a Marriott that used to be a historical hotel 50 years ago.
That's true.
Here's a Hilton that used to be a historic hotel 50
fair.
years
Our
ago.
things still
Ours
feel
at least
historic.
had history.
Yeah,
and we didn't even do the full historical tour. He just give us like the highlights.
All right, none of us can compete with Europe in that area.
I think we need to mention, I did not know George Washington designed the original canal system in Richmond. That was actually,
all right.
I mean, that's a pretty big deal.
That could be your trump card right there.
I mean, that's kind of cool.
Yeah. So you went on history, but we went on
We know the Alamo was at San Antonio. We know.
But it's not on the walk.
It's not on their walk. That's true. That is not. Yeah, those are 2 separate visits.
All right. Well, we'll spare the audience by moving on here. I don't know if this debate is resolved, but the news story that I did want to dive into today, I really do feel is jaw-dropping in its the audacity of the Biden administration to just invade our local schools and try to become this heavy hammer and wield its power, its will on local school issues like explicit books, transgenderism. It really is stunning, and I do think it reveals this, what I think is a pretty clear radical communist mindset that's driving the White House right now. I know that sounds kind of out there, but when you hear what we're going to talk about that they are doing, it does have communistic similarities of tactics. So, Victoria, bring us up to speed real quick with just what's happening in Roanoke County, for instance.
Yeah, so again, it just always astounds me when I hear these stories. But yeah, Roanoke County. Now, I think I have to set some context. All across Virginia right now, school boards are dealing with the new transgender guidelines that came out from Governor Youngkin. So you remember we had bad ones under Governor Northam. Now we have good ones, and the school boards they're kind of back at the drawing board of, are they going to align with the new, state guidelines, or are they going to try to stand firm and whatnot? So these conversations, and they're heated, of course. There are different opinions about this.
They're important because the old guidelines actually encourage schools to hide things from parents, and the Youngkin ones took that out. It's important.
It's exactly right. So of course, Roanoke, like many other counties, this is Roanoke County. There's a difference. So just for folks to know, there's Roanoke City and Roanoke County, and so Roanoke County is addressing this, and they, this is not a big deal, but they had a couple of left-wing activists who got heated. And I say this is not a big deal because this happens at a lot of school boards. And so they basically handled it. I mean, there was a news story about it. Mm-hmm. But what I think is alarming is what's going on with the federal government and trying to jump in.
Yeah, and like you're saying, we're talking about maybe two demonstrators who obviously purposely came into the school board meeting with the intent of disrupting everything. And they were screaming, "Protect trans kids," throughout school board presentations. So the school board had to do something. So let's just let our audience hear those protesters for a few seconds.
"Protect trans kids" is what a resident in Roanoke County was yelling while being handcuffed by police. Roanoke County Police confirmed to WDBJ7 2 people were arrested and are being charged with trespassing after they refused to leave the school board meeting.
I mean, so this is a situation where you just have a couple of protesters, and they're loud and all that, but the police obviously handle it, and the school board is just trying to have a civil conversation. But then they get this veiled threat from the Biden administration. They're going to send in their guys to help, because when you need help, bring in the federal government.
Yeah, and I think the civil conversation part is important because if you are allowed to just go in and shut down meetings, then parents and people can't participate in their school board conversation. So the school board does have a right to protect that. And then clearly the Biden administration is using this as an excuse to escalate, kind of throw fire on this. Oh, well, you're having a conflict. We need to come in and, but help us understand, Victoria, exactly the tactic that was used here, how they presented this to the local school board, that they're coming in from the White House.
Yeah, so I think it was the Daily Wire that was reporting on this. And basically they broke a story revealing that the school board members, just a couple of days after this arrest, received emails from something called Community Relations Service, so CRS, out of the Biden Department of Justice. And so basically they said a so-called conciliation specialist wanted to come in and help respond to, quote, community tensions and hate crimes. They use the word hate crimes.
Yeah.
And so, of course, there aren't any documented hate crimes here. They're just yelling in a school board meeting.
Who's doing the hate crime?
Apparently. And this, I would say they think that the school board members about to pass a policy they don't like is going to be what they're going to go after. It's not about the parents.
Yeah.
And part of me just thinks they knew the governor passed new transgender guidelines. That's been all over national news. I feel like they were just waiting.
Yes.
Like we knew this is coming. We're just waiting for the first opportunity to jump in and scare everybody so they can't have these conversations, so they don't change the standards. Yes. I mean, I know that sounds, I'm not a conspiracy theorist.
They obviously were. And it bothers me because it does make me think of these stories you hear out of communistic China, North Korea, where you have these agents, the party agents, go in the local communities and police what's happening. And if you're in line, and it feels like this conciliatory specialist.
Yeah, I don't like the name of that at all.
Yeah.
Oh, and also, I just want to note, there's like over 13,000 school districts in the United States.
Yeah.
Like, are they going to do this and pretty much every school board lately, just anywhere has been contentious because people have a lot of
Yes.
anger and it's bubbling over and it's not. And so, yeah, local police need to be ready and prepared to handle it, and school board members need to be prepared. But is the federal government going to go into like 13,000 plus school districts?
So obviously this is selectively
Right.
applied, and it's a great tool because as a leftist, oh well, if I want to get the power of the federal government, I'll just go in and make this protest and say
Yeah.
it's a conflict, get arrested, have them come in. But I will mention, I do feel like the Biden administration is kind of scouring the headlines for what
They have to be.
Yeah.
I mean, it's Roanoke County, for heaven's sake.
Yeah,
This is not.
yes.
I mean, this is not even anyway.
So what's disturbing about that is there's a lot of just hurt and harm with our kids going on in the public education system. Just to mention one thing, 65% of all U.S. fourth graders, we recently learned, are not reading. They're reading below proficient levels. That this is coming out of the whole COVID thing. There's real harm to our kids. And this is apparently the priority of the Biden administration, or how they think that they're going to help
They're not
kids.
rushing in to send in tutors. I mean, it'd be really great if the federal government was like, "Hey, you're having a problem. I got 1,000 people to launch into your county to like mentor all these kids." But I don't know if I'd really want the federal government.
Yeah.
Backtrack. I just really don't want
But
them
if you're
involved at
going to
all.
have
But
that, I mean, this isn't the issue.
no, this isn't. And we have to comment on the wording of these emails because,
Yeah.
to your point, it sounds kind of like, we have to get everybody on the same narrative. They sound communistic. So they say they are, quote, aware of ongoing community tensions in Roanoke following the release of these new model policies for transgender students. And we want to help you, quote, manage conflict within your community. In other words, they're here to stamp out any dissent. And this is not like a school board meeting is not a community tension. It's like there's people who are passionate who show up and make their voices heard.
There's conflict because there's real issues
It's
involved.
it's important. Like,
Yeah.
and America's not unified on a whole lot
Right.
these days. I hate to say it. I wish we were, but
Yeah. And you know what I was saying earlier about it's almost a great kind of heckler's veto, where if you don't want something happening, you can call up the federal government. And the reason I said that is because some reporters asked the White House,
like, how did
that happen? How did you end up in Roanoke? And they said, well, we can respond to reports and you know where the reports are coming from.
Yeah.
And they said, and it can also be what was
And it
the
wasn't
word?
like we can respond to media reports. It was like somebody can bring us in, right? Isn't that
Yeah.
really what it was?
Yeah.
It's like somebody can request.
They can be invited into
That's it,
communities
yes.
by a stakeholder. I think we can guess who the stakeholders were.
The right does not invite the federal government into communities, I can assure you. So we know which direction the person is coming from, if that's real.
And
I want to believe that they're telling the truth, but I honestly don't even know.
They gave a caveat to that point.
Okay.
They said it can also be unsolicited.
Okay, there we go.
So there's the scouring the
Yeah,
headlines.
I was like, I don't even know that anybody called
Yeah.
them in. I mean, maybe, but I'm not buying that.
Well, the bigger issue, again, with all this is you would think they would have learned their lesson, like we said in our introduction,
Yes.
when they got so much pushback when, the Biden administration basically directed the FBI to go after parents, to target them as domestic terrorists. And I would say that really slung the election here in Virginia, the governor's election.
Yeah.
So
But they're still on the same mission. They're just trying
Yeah.
to execute it a different way. That's how I see it.
yeah.
They still want to quiet down any disagreement or anything that's going on that and they're just trying to. I think
Yeah.
it's not a letter to the FBI this time because that can get caught.
Well, and that's the scary part, is that it's not just about politics. They actually have a deeper agenda of actually wanting to control things
I think so.
and silence parents and school boards. So
Yeah, unless this country is on a dramatically different track in 50 years, school boards are going to be contentious for quite a season here, and that's. We want them to be civil. We want people to have very civil dialogue, but that's just how it's going to be. And the local governments are prepared and can handle it. And the federal government needs to let people have their voice. That's what we call free speech in America. First Amendment. That's our thing.
And we are prepared here at the Family Foundation, which we are going to talk about in a little bit, with our resources we're going to dig in and come alongside the parents
Absolutely.
in these local communities. But before I get into that, This is not the only issue that the Biden administration has found it fit to just inject itself into at the local level. There's also the library book issue.
Yeah, we've talked about that on previous podcasts about how the Biden administration, in particular, they targeted, if you remember, a county, Forsyth in Georgia, where parents were concerned about explicit books. Back to this whole book debate.
Yeah. The school board actually listened to the parents and decided to review several books that the parents were saying this is way too explicit for kids. And because of that, this time the attack from the Biden administration came through the Education Department, the Department of Education, their Civil Rights Office. Apparently, we've embedded these civil rights offices
in every single department, which is very disturbing.
And they're being weaponized, as we see here. And so it was announced in May that the school district was under investigation by this civil rights office. And they came out with the results of that investigation, which were totally predictable. And it was that removal or even just review of all these books may have created a hostile environment. Notice the word may there.
Yeah. I don't even have I don't even know what to say to how ridiculous this stuff is getting. I mean, this is out of control.
Well, and let me just follow up real quick. Even though they're saying May, they don't even have documented proof that there was a hostile environment. There was some teeth to this where the school actually had to enter into a resolution agreement. They actually did this and committed to doing climate surveys. Now, you know what that means.
Yes. Climate surveys. That is going to be the tool for them to figure out that there has in fact been, anything other than the narrative being pushed forward, right? That there's something, that there's anybody saying anything that's not on point with the Biden administration. And more than that, it's just going to be used to usher in more LGBT indoctrination.
Yeah. Anybody that has any history with GLSEN, I mean, we know exactly how those climate surveys work.
Yes.
That's their primary tool.
I mean, anybody can just say somebody looked at me wrong in that meeting, and it's because I'm one of these minority groups of some type, and there we go. We now have a bad climate, and we need the federal government to step in, and this is a real problem.
And keep in mind, this is all happening because parents simply verbalize their concerns about sexually explicit books, and then the school board, dared to respond to that.
Yeah. So, I mean, all of this is just a purely political tactic meant to intimidate local school boards and local authorities and to stifle the efforts of parental rights groups. And so, and I think in particular, groups like ours, to be honest with you, that are working to help resource parents, as you mentioned, on our Protect Every Kid campaign, dealing with these transgender guidelines.
And this is being, we're seeing both the DOJ and the Education Department being weaponized against parents, which that is not supposed to be the functions
of federal government.
Federal government.
No.
But Victoria, I wanted you to comment real quick on the message that not just parents but school boards are supposed to get from this, because we have all these school boards having these book battles and the issues over the transgender being promoted to kids, transgenderism being promoted. So what is the message the Biden administration is trying to send to the school?
I don't think there's any doubt. The message is, people naturally don't like conflict, right? None of us want to have conflict. And school board members have to be brave to take up issues of conflict, right? It's easier to shove them aside. So when parents have concerns, it's much easier to not address it than address it. And then if you have the federal government coming in and saying, you're creating this, the climate is bad, you're creating this tense thing, and we're going to have to, they're just trying to make sure these things don't even get on the agenda from parents. Like that parents who want to, review books, parents that want to, take the right guidelines, they don't want school boards touching that. They want school boards to absolutely just go along, do the left-wing thing, do it quietly, don't.
So what is the school board member supposed to think, oh, this happened in this other district?
Oh, yeah. It's not meant just for that district. It is absolutely a message to be sent because we have, we have over 100 school districts here that are all, as I mentioned, right in the middle of having to deal with this. So of course you pick one and you immediately jump in to try to send a message to everybody else. Yeah. Don't switch back. You've adopted the Northam bad guidelines.
Yeah.
Just don't do anything because this is out of control.
And maybe you might lose funding is kind of what I might think.
Oh, sure, too. That's fair. They
unspoken
haven't direct said it, but yes. And that's the entire school board. If you pay attention to school boards, that's what they're paying attention to, is the money. Follow the money.
All right. I just have to mention real quick one update out of this that we have not spoken about, and that is the White House. They've really gone over the top. They have now appointed what people are calling the book ban czar. We now actually have an official whose entire job is to monitor these so-called book ban battles.
I just want to know what they're not doing when they spend all their time in local school boards. Like, what were the functions of the White House and the federal government that they're supposed to be working on? To your point about reading scores and all this stuff, where you have somebody coming in to, quote, help schools understand that book bans may violate, this is how they put it, violate civil right laws if they continue to create a hostile environment, right? This is what they're saying. Like, these bans are going to create an environment. And so there's going to be a lawsuit coming. And so that's the whole problem.
Yeah. All right, another rich irony here. So President Biden actually unveiled or announced that he was going to be jumping into this book issue at this big White House Pride Month event in June. Do you remember what else happened at this same
I was on sabbatical. I don't remember.
Okay.
What else happened?
Remember the pornographic display of a
the
transgender
drag person thing?
Yes. This happened at the same time that
They're
Biden's
literally
announcing.
doing this, yes, because they don't see any problem with any of this. It's just, oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty bad. So now we got them weaponizing everybody against all of our parents on anything that they're concerned about that goes against the left-wing ideology.
And you're saying they're spending all this time and money on these social agendas, and I mean that's why the parents are protesting in the first place.
Correct. Maybe if they'd stop pushing, parents would have to stop pushing back. We wouldn't need to push back if they would stop putting this stuff in every school. I mean, remember they also, started talking about taking your lunch money. Remember that? Like local schools. I'm
not sure I'm up on that.
Remember
one.
the free and reduced lunch? Like they were. I mean, they're always trying to.
Oh, they were
hold
threatening the schools.
Right. They're
threatening
on the
transgender
schools.
issue.
Yes. So if they'd stop doing that
over lunch money for poor children.
Right.
Yeah, it's over the top.
It's the bully literally
we don't even have
and
words.
stealing your lunch money. It's ridiculous.
They're the real bully, but. You tried to bring up Protect Every Kid.
I think
and I
we
got
should
on
mention because we do have some amazing resources for parents. We aren't going to give up just because the federal government's stepping in. Why don't you tell them a little bit about what's available for parents who are fighting back and what we can do to help?
We are going to work even harder to make sure parents have a voice, and we have updated our Protect Every Kid website. We've made this easy to have tools at your fingertips. And the whole theme of the Protect Every Kid website, whether it's explicit books or the transgender issues, that we're going to work together. Local communities, local parents have a right and a responsibility, a God-given responsibility, not to mention a constitutional one, to step up for their kids and protect their hearts, minds, their bodies at school. This, whether it's being exposed to pornographic content or having safety in their bathroom, they have a right to speak up for that. And so we have put conversation tips, talking points when you want to do a public testimony at your school board. There's Protect Every Kid downloadable flyers, just step by step how to get involved, what is going on with the transgender policies. You can access those right at your fingertips. Is there anything else you wanted to?
No, I mean, I think that's the main point. And if you are struggling and you need some strategy, I mean, we're happy to help with folks. Just walk through. I mean, we've now been to enough of these. We know how they go down, and we know some of the tactics used by the other side. We know some of the arguments made by their opposing school board members. So if folks just need help, they can reach out as well.
Yeah. Well, it's that time again. Time for our Inconceivable Moments Award. This is where we're featuring examples of the absolute lunacy and craziness that happens when cultural leaders try to give guidance completely apart from biblical principles. And we're calling this the Liberals' Most Inconceivable Moments Award.
Inconceivable!
Well, for our Inconceivable today, Victoria, I've been saving a special one for when you come back to comment on.
Okay.
And, we've been talking today about this aggressive push of transgenderism, promotion of transgenderism onto our nation's campuses. And it's not just happening, at the secondary level. We're seeing this also very aggressively on our college campuses, our universities. And students are starting to push back on just them feeling like their classes, their fields of studies are being hypersexualized with these agendas. And just want to throw out the latest example of this that I saw that I thought was interesting. And that is there is a team of researchers affiliated with Oregon State University. And they attempted to do this national study of what they said they were trying to measure the experiences of transgender and, quote, nonconforming students who were in the STEM fields, like the science, math, engineering type fields. And so apparently a lot of these students didn't really appreciate this kind of line of questioning.
Yeah, so apparently STEM folks, engineering, they're not really thrilled with let's just constantly throw in the LGBT stuff to everything. So they basically, out of 349 responses that these researchers got, there were 50 that they've now labeled malicious. So
yeah, and I just have to say, I'm sorry, but some of these students' responses were hilarious. I mean, they have a wicked sense of humor. I don't know if this is just a special talent among science and engineering students. Seriously, I think some of them could maybe write for Saturday Night Live if Saturday Night Live had not already gone so woke.
Yeah, so I mean, before we share these answers, you have to understand they were asked specifically to share their gender identity, their racial and ethnic identity, and their disability. So, yeah. So one person actually put as their disability, my pride, which it is a disability for some of us. I think that's fair. And then, so another student identified as an Apache helicopter, which...
An attack helicopter.
Yeah, I don't even know,
Apache attack.
Yeah, where do they come up? I don't know where somebody comes up with that. It's just on their... they're just thinking about it. And then someone else, there's kind of this flight theme in these for some reason. I don't know if it's the same... a group of people that were near each other or what, or just, but there's an F-16 fighter was one of the other answers.
Yeah.
And then there was a pansexual attack helicopter. So I don't know what a pansexual attack helicopter is, but I guess they felt like they had to throw in one of the identities and then say what they say.
I think it sounds like an intimidating military weapon, personally.
Yeah, I think they're definitely all offensive. I don't know.
I don't know where you're going to go with that one.
They're just... There's a little aggression coming out, is I guess what I'm saying.
Yeah. And people freak out about that. But, you're pushing things on these students all the time. Yeah. And we need to be able to understand sarcasm. But I personally liked the comment where they said, I'm just doing this for the gift card. They put that in all of the question fields.
Probably exactly right. They're just being honest.
Well, apparently there was a $5 Amazon gift card.
Yeah.
What else we got here? Oh, interestingly, there was one student and this student may have been sincere. I don't know. He identified as male. For the race, he said he was Puerto Rican. And then for ethnicity, he put American. And this was labeled as a malicious response.
Interesting. I don't even know what to say to that. But they also had a person that identified as a human being, which sometimes I feel like when you ask me all these questions, I actually really appreciate that response.
Why isn't that a legitimate response?
They're a human being. That really shouldn't be considered a malicious response. And then there was another one that listed male, but spelled it M-A-I-L. I hope by college and being an engineering student, they know how to spell male, but somehow that is listed as being malicious. And then there's another one that identified as Jason Bourne, which I know a lot of guys that would like to identify as Jason Bourne, so I thought that was funny.
Well, it said identity, and they just put Bourne,
spelled
B-O-U.
like Jason Bourne.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, if these are, let's be fair, if these are male engineering or science students, which is probably predominantly the case, I mean, they're probably going to identify as helicopters and Jason Bourne. So, not Barbie.
No, I never know. I don't know if there were Barbie responses. Maybe this is before the big Barbie push, or whether there's any females in the. Well, I don't know.
But I just kind of had this visual in my head of these mystery science theater type, because maybe really brilliant mathematics students are going to fall a little bit more on the nerdy side of things.
Maybe they need an outlet. They need a creative outlet, and they're like, "This is going to be my creative outlet." I mean, I need a creative outlet if I spend all day doing math.
Yeah. The sad part is, apparently in academia, we have lost all understanding of sarcasm because this was not only labeled as malicious by the researchers, but they did an entire study of the malicious responses themselves.
That just sounds like they're desperate for research, and their university saying, you got to publish, you got to publish, you got to publish. And so they do a study of their study going bad. I don't know what else to say about that.
To be fair, I tried to look through and see, is there anything really malicious here? And the best thing that I could find, not best in that sense of the word, but the thing that could most accurately, that I could find, be described as malicious was a very crude, sexually obscene comment that I would agree no researcher should have to read that. I'm sorry that I read it. But I think this gets to a bigger issue of the frustration on college campuses right now.
Yeah, I mean, these are probably not Christians, right? So they're responding. These are not people who are responding in a redemptive way, but they're feeling that frustration that I think a lot of people feel, that this agenda is being pushed on them, that they are looked at in their all their micro classes, that's how they're viewed, instead of just being, hey, I'm a great STEM student, I have to identify all these things. And so I think they're just really sick and tired of having this sexual propaganda pushed on them all the time.
Clearly.
Yeah.
But sadly, that is not the conclusion that the researchers drew from these responses. Their conclusion, no kidding, was that 50 responses constituted a national epidemic of what they said was rise of online fascism in America. That's their conclusion. And of course, that means that we need more social justice education in STEM fields.
You just can't win with these studies. You can't win for trying. If they find what they want to find, then that justifies more of it. If they don't find what they want to find, they then research to find another way.
Need more re-education.
Right. Ultimately, they're all headed in one direction. There's bias before they even start the studies, and I think these kids know it.
Yes, there is bias before they start them. Yeah. And you can't even really have a legitimate study, I don't think, anyway, totally, when people are self-selecting, if it is a self-selected.
Correct.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't even sound, honestly, like the research methodology is solid, so there's that, too.
All right, well, all I got to say is, these poor students, they're subjected to this. Then the proposals, they get more what I'm going to call re-education training. But for this week's Inconceivable Award, I think I'm going to flip the script here and give a positive Inconceivable Award to the students for somehow managing to keep a fragment of their sense of humor in this culture where they are constantly being force-fed identity politics. They still have a sense of humor in this, and better yet, they can still say they are American. So that's our award. They didn't totally surrender to the woke.
Well, I think the good news is we always hoped there'd be a pendulum, that these things swing back, and maybe we're finally getting pushback. And so I think that's the positive. But with that, I think we need to wrap and call it a week. And let me just remind folks to go ahead and share this with your friends, listen, give a review. All those good things help our podcast. And then don't forget, we are stronger when we speak together.